So it's going to be a mishmash of sorts, but the issues can be related because some people will say that why do citizens protest is because of issues like what we see in Jos, etc. This morning, we're being joined by Dr. Charles Omole, who's the Director General, Institute for Police and Security Policy Research. He's also a lawyer and a national security expert. Dr. Charles Omole, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
We also have joining us virtually Mr. Seyi Adetayo, who is the CEO of Eon's Intelligence and also a security expert. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Adetayo.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, these are the issues that we now have on our hand. I'm sure you must have heard Mr. Pampe when he spoke about the incident that happened. He gave like an eyewitness account, even though he said he wasn't physically present at the time, but he had visited some days before and also visited right afterwards. And, they had been noticing things in their environment. So let's start from there first before we come back to the Take It Back protest and what it is that they are demanding. But listening to what he said, and the fact that the community had enjoyed relative peace prior to these latest attacks, where do you think we're getting this move around security wrong?
Well, I mean, the challenge is sometimes talking about insecurity in Nigeria is becoming a little bit depressing because it's like Groundhog Day, just going around in circles. And sometimes when we focus on the outcome, we miss the fact that we actually need to look at the root causes of these things rather than the specific activities. The problem with insecurity in Nigeria have several sort of main issues to it. The first, in this particular instance, there is a massive lack of trust in our security agencies by citizens. You can't have a situation, for example, where police or any security agency will be in every corner of the nation. But without that security, without that trust, rather, what the nation loses is a huge, a group of what I call human intelligence sources. Back in the West, you see them go on TV, they will tell you a crime happened 5 years ago on this street. Within 2 days, 100 people will call in to say, okay, I was on that street, I saw what happened and all that. That doesn't happen around here because people feel that sometimes even when they report, they become the target. So what you have is these huge human intelligence sources that every Nigerian is supposed to be for security agencies doesn't exist. And then, of course, the procured intelligence, which is now the people that the security agencies are now inserting into communities, they don't exist either. So what happens is getting credible information becomes difficult. And that, for me, is a problem here. Because many times in the past I've addressed specific incidents, and then the same incident happened the following week, then the same incident happened the following week. So we can't keep talking about incidents without looking at the root causes. And I think that's probably where we need to look for solution.
Okay, let me come to you, Dr. Adetayo. You have heard, the resident from Bokos local government area. Can you give us your own impressions of what he said? What did you take away as the things that are wrong? And do you see where we can begin to fix things right?
Okay, Maupe, thank you and good morning. Maupe, thank you and good morning. Maupe, thank you and good morning. Thank you and good morning. I think that the situation as it is today likely depends on how each parties or different parts of the communities are looking at the situation in Plateau State. We've heard from your guests, and I'm sure that if people from the other side are invited to speak, they're also going to look at it from a different perspective. But by and large, my major takeaway from his comments is the fact that he said that the people has little or nothing to do. But I think that this issue basically lies on the people. No, we've been experiencing these situations for a long time, and these are people that have been living together, dancing together, eating together over the years. Today, they are now, there have been cases of killings. If you look at what happened in December 2023, I think over 300 people were killed, and an incident also February 2024. My take here is that when the people decide that they want to make peace, they are ready to give peace a chance, then the efforts of the government, the efforts of the security agencies will begin to bring about meaning, will become impactful, then we'll begin to see the results. We need to understand this, that there is no how security agencies can put boots, because he was talking about we need more boots. The issue is not about having more boots on the ground. The issue is about looking at the root causes of this crisis, then call the parties involved, and also make them to see reasons why they must put an end to this. There have been series of committees, series of interventions in the past, and the reason why they are not working is because the people are not allowing it to work. As long as we are still focused on and high for an eye, it will make everyone in the community to become blind.
Are you saying? Sorry, Dr. Adetayo, to interrupt you. I don't know if you can hear me. Are you saying that this is a reprisal?
That is what it's looking at. Looking like if you're looking at issues around perhaps something happened some months back, and some people, because I saw a report where a journalist was saying that they cannot point out that this is the reason why this happened. But the truth is that if you look at the situations in the past, it has been around communities being sacked, lands being taken away from certain people. They want to take their land back, or some people were killed, and then they coming back to say, except we want to continue to deceive ourselves. These are being carried out by people in the same community. So we should ask ourselves. He himself talked about super camps in the community, that the people who attacked, after attacking, went back to the community where they came from. Except we want to continue to deceive ourselves. It is not about how much the state government can do right now. It's not about how much the law enforcement or security agency can do about it. It is how far the people in Mango, in Bokos, are ready to allow peace to reign. It is not something
what he made reference to, sorry to interrupt you once more, what he made reference to were criminal super camps. That was what he said, not communities as such. Criminal super camps. In other words, it would seem that there is at least that's the impression I get, that there is a conglomeration of some sort of people who are living in a particular area, and people know that generally the people who live there are bad people, and it seems that we've just left them. Nothing is happening. Nobody is tackling that conglomeration, it would seem. And that's where they live. According to him, when he went back there, they couldn't even still go back to the community fully because they could hear gunshots ringing from those quarters. So is this, is this negligence on our part, or are we saying that perhaps those super camps he was referring to are actually entirely livable communities? Are they communities, ethnic communities, from where these attacks are coming?
Now, the question is, what forms a community? The people from communities. That's the reality. Whether they are thatch roofed houses, whether they are brick and mortar houses, they have people that are, the moment people are living in a particular place, taking a living, it's a community. Now, it depends on the formation, the types of the constituent of the people that are living in that community. They are communities, and they are known to be communities. And maybe often than not, there must have been interaction between those communities. You see, we need to, I'm speaking from, security and intelligence standpoint here. Anyone that kills is or can be seen as a criminal. Whether, they are part of a community, they form the community, or they were brought into the community, they are criminals. And the action that they have carried out is a crime, as far as the law, is concerned. So whether we call them criminal communities or not, killings are regarded as a criminal act. So we need to look at how can we and then say, oh, this just happened. It is not something that started now. There is a build-up to this. And that is what we need to look at. And as long as we've not created a situation where justice will be seen. Now, the people that are crying out, the reason why they are crying out is that they want justice. I heard the governor saying that they're going to prosecute the people who carry this out. Now, the question is that, will that prosecution assuage the pain of those whose relatives and family have been killed now? Would that be enough? Would that sufficiently stop them from revenging in the future? Or some people that are aggrieved revenging in the future? That's the issue that we need to look at. And I want to call our attention to Ife Modakeke. Today they are living peacefully now. But there was a time that these people, twice, they were at war. But something happened that made them to live peacefully today. And that's what we need to look at. Umbuleri, Aguleri, there was a time that they were at war. People there were killing, one another each other for a long time until, peace was brought to that town. And today two are living together. I remember there was a time when some four security vigilantes were killed at School of Nursing in Pop, which would have led into resurgence of that, communal clashes between Umbuleri and Aguleri. Interventions were made. The leadership of the community were made to see reasons why they should not allow the pains of the past, the issues of the past to be brought back. And they allow reasons to prevail. And today they are living, peacefully. Okay. We can't get to that level in Plateau State. All
right, Dr. Aditya, let me bring it to Dr. Molly here. You've heard his own submissions. And in my experience, as a journalist, been, asking questions on these issues ever since they broke. It just has in one of the longest areas where we have, covered these issues from as far back as, say, 2010, 2011, is when we've been talking about killings in Jos. I want to find out from you, because oftentimes from what we now know, we know that usually if this is a reprisal, oftentimes it is not the community where the reprisal has happened that carried out the offense. Oftentimes it could be another community, or it could be one singular incident, an isolated incident that an entire village is made to pay for. In this instance, it's not yet clear what precisely has led to this very brutal attacks. Because when you think about how it has happened, we understand people on motorcycles, coming out with guns and just shooting sporadically in broad daylight, not targeting anyone, but targeting everyone. And at the end of the day, 50 people losing their lives. And those are the people that they can count and account for. 300 homes burnt, 700 people displaced, just like that. And these attacks, go on and on sporadically. And people always ask, what exactly is going on? The people of the community always say, look, it seems there is a grand plan. And people usually around the North Central, you've heard this in Benue, you've heard this in Jos, always say that there is a grand plan to take away their lands. They fear that that is what is happening. How do we begin to find, because I think it still boils down to that particular question. How do we begin to find a long, because you've spoken about the absence of trust. That trust seems to be completely broken between the people and security agencies. But at the same time, the people acknowledge that over a year now, there have been no attacks. So they don't even know where this is coming from. What do you think needs to happen for, one, trust to be built again, and for us to be able to say we're actually making progress and making sure we stamp out these sort of attacks?
You see, to resolve matters like this, you have to approach it from two sides. The first is, what do you do to reduce the penchant for criminality, or reprisal, as you might want to call it? The second is, what can the security agencies do to deter those who are such-minded? Now, the two have to go hand in hand. Now, clearly, in terms of security agencies, the pattern is the same in terms of, many people coming on motorbikes, even in the days of Boko Haram, attacking villages in the northeast, again, it's the same thing. They will come out of the bush on motorbikes, sometimes 50 motorbikes, and then you ask yourself why they will be on 50 motorbikes and ride for over an hour or 2 hours, and nobody stops them. You know, so that comes to the side of what the government can do in terms of early warning system and things to deter it. But in terms of, it comes back to what I said first, in terms of confidence. The people don't have confidence in the fact that the government, I'm using the government to include security agencies here, you know, can resolve issues for them. That's why they go for self-help. You know, if I know that if, you know, my house is burnt down by a particular group, if I report it to authorities, I know they will deal with it. That will reduce my desire to personally, you know, respond. But once I've gotten to the point where it's like, look, government, they're not going to do anything. So it's like, you know, so everything's based on what I can do. And I think that is the problem here. And it could be a day, a month, a year. People, when they're that minded, they will. And what they tend to do is look for the weakest point where they feel they can get, you know, they have a way of gathering their own intelligence, either a sort of a town, a period where, you know, people are weak. For example, it's known that in some parts of the world, during the Ramadan season, for example, certain criminality increases because the assumption is during that period, people are not as strong physically, you know, compared to, you know, outside that. So they target periods where they feel they can have maximum impact. So the issue here is still boils down to that same thing, trust.
And can we really because there are big questions around the motive. If you say, okay, somebody in our community was murdered, we're not happy about it, somebody in our community was killed, there was a clash somewhere, can we really justify this sort of attacks, this sort of brazen, reckless, brutal attacks where people just take out anybody, be they elderly people, be they children, you know? Let us not also forget, because in this context of trust, and when you look at what has happened in the entire, well, not central, yes, but also some parts of the northeast. When you're looking at Taraba, you're looking at Adama, which don't exactly fall on that north central, but also have some of the, well, I say the makeup that we see in the north central area. And you had voices like General T.Y. Danjuma, you know, who spoke, and that has not been forgotten, you know, when he said that, look, you have to defend yourselves. The security agencies have been compromised. Can we really, you know, have we been able to answer fully as a country what exactly the motive of those who are carrying out these attacks are? Well, I think the motives are well known. And are they? Oh, yes, so the motives are well known. What are the motives? Well, I mean, it would be hearsay on my part, but I think one can say there are ethnic and religious related, you know, motives for some of the things that's happening. We saw what happened in Southern Kaduna for a long time, you know, until this new administration there, you know, and it was recurring almost every few weeks. Another incident will happen in Southern Kaduna, you know. So clearly that's an example of an agenda, as it were. And again, the issue here is a matter of the government demonstrating that they can deal with this, and by doing that, they're giving people confidence. As long as, you know, we just throw our hands up and, you know, we, you know, give condolence messages, you know, and all that, and then the next thing happened, what that does is it allows it to continue. You know, it has become an industry, more or less.
You know, when you talk about it like that, then we have to start looking for solutions.
Yes.
To combat an industry. I've always said, a money-making venture, if people are making money from chaos, the chaos will continue. Now, just a few questions about these situations. Like in Bokos, it's not just Bokos. Bokos, Manguna, Hurti, Josho, Dafo. These are a lot of communities. Are we saying that there's no police presence in any of these places? Are these unmanned, are these unpoliced parts of Plateau State? Is that what we can point and say to the governor? That you have these areas in local governments in your state that do not have police presence. So crime and criminality can go on, and then we now have, every month, we come back and we have the same conversation about what has happened in Plateau State?
No, they do have police presence. I mean, every local government in Nigeria do have police presence. Of course, the number may vary, you know, and I do also know that the numbers in Plateau was increased you know, because there are certain states that have more police numbers than other states, you know, and I know the numbers in Plateau was increased recently. So there is police presence. The question has to be, are they in sufficient numbers? That's number one. Number two, are they properly tooled and equipped to deal with things like this? That's number two. Number three, are there possibility of fifth columnists within the security agencies that allow these things to happen? You know, turn a blind eye to it. I mean, one of the challenges, if you read all the insecurity incidents in Nigeria, Boko Haram, everything, when the media reports it, the police tend to show up after the criminals have gone.
Yes.
In practically every case, you know, and the question you ask yourself is why? Why would criminals be operating in a village for, say, 2-3 hours, murdering people, and security agencies are nowhere to be found, and then after they've left, suddenly security agencies appear? So I mean, it's not within the realm of reason for people to suspect that there might be some fifth columnists within the security agencies that sympathize with the aims or objectives of these criminals and therefore steer them away. You know, it's like deliberate blindness, so to speak. But these things, you know, the government might say, no, it's not happening, but then prove it. Prove that it's not happening by making an example showing that indeed these things can be tackled. And these things can be tackled.
The Inspector General of Police's office has tactical teams.
Yes.
Were sent to troubled areas. Special teams, specially trained to handle these situations. What's happening with those tactical teams?
The challenge, I think, with the policing structure is the fact that I don't think the police have been given the current Inspector General of Police started what they call the Special Intervention Squad. But the vision, original vision behind it was for the Special Intervention Squad to exist in every state. In other words, they are there as standby force to respond. That requires a level of resources that I don't think the police have. So what they do is they'll have the Special Intervention Squad only in certain areas. So which means there is always this gap between when they are deployed. For example, if something's happening in Niger State and the Special Intervention Squad are in Abuja, it will take them time to get to the location. Whereas if there is a Niger State contingent that permanently in Niger State, they can respond faster. But the level of resources needed for such nationwide blanket, I don't think the police have been provided. So they are doing the best they can, I think, with whatever little resources they have. But the key issue there is there's a need for deterrence. You know, one of the things, even not just beyond security, even basic crime, one of the things that allows crime to thrive in this country is lack of consequence. No deterrence.
Lack of consequence.
You know, and because there's lack of consequence, people are emboldened to do even more. I was telling somebody yesterday, I said politicians are the same everywhere. You know, in England, in the US, they're all the same. I said the difference is they live in a society where there are consequences. That restrains the potential excesses. But when you are in a society like this, where there's no consequence, then clearly the raw political, manipulations will come out. And I think that's the challenge we have with our security. You know, if we make example of certain events like this, for example, they go after them, and by the way, the other thing is, we need to combine kinetic and non-kinetic approaches to solving this problem. It's not just about catching the criminals and killing them, or or sending bombs. It's about looking for what actually are the root causes. There are, he was mentioning the issue about Ife and Modakeke earlier. Part of what resolved that was not just about shooting people. Yeah. It's about dialogue. It's about finding out what actually is the issue. And we have peace there today. So it's not everything that will have to be kinetic. So what is a kinetic strategy that the Plateau State government have in dealing with this recurring insecurity?
I want to be able to talk with Dr. Adetayo a little bit about this. You've heard what Dr. Mole said about the kinetic and non-kinetic approaches. And we've even heard from the military, which is interesting. Whenever the Chief of Defense Staff is speaking, he always says, we're doing the kinetic bit, we need you to do the non-kinetic bit. And I think the National Security Advisor in some way was alluding to that when he said, look, the communities have their role to play. And I've heard you speak up about that in the course of our conversations today. What's now? A meeting, a peace-building meeting? We have peace builders across this country from all kinds of agencies. doing what they can. Is it peace building or is this a poverty situation? And how do we stop these reprisals?
Okay, thanks. So the issue is that we cannot continue to do the same thing over and over, and then we're expecting a different result. We need to have a change of approach. Look at what we've done wrong in the past in terms of trying to bring an end to these killings. And like I said, and thanks to Dr. Molly, also, elaborating more on that. There's a fact that the people must be made to agree to the fact that peace must reign. Now, see, talking about super camps, you see, in each community, we have criminal elements. And it's possible somebody will leave one community to go and foment trouble in another community. How do we look at the action of that person? Do we see it as an isolated issue, an individual crime, or we see it as, oh, these people have come again and they have come and attack us, and they were responding as a community instead of treating the matter as an individual action. So over the year, there have been this distrust. There are lots of people that are actually benefiting from this crisis. And until all those elements too are also identified, the enterprise that this crisis has created, they are also demolished. So we have to look at all those areas, talking to the people, making the people to see reasons why they need to come together. Also looking at those who have been benefiting from this crisis over the years to try and demolish their enterprise so that the peace building and that government will try to implement will work. And this should not be left to Plateau State government. I think it's something that has to be taken up at the federal level, involving the Plateau State government, where they have leaders of means, leaders that have, that people respect, and those that are so, conversant and so, experienced in the area of building peace, dialoguing, crisis management, so that bringing them into this new non-kinetic measure and trying to resolve this issue. We need to make the community to see that as long as we continue to see ourselves from tribal lenses, religious lens, tribal lens, we will not find solution. Criminals are criminals. When criminals try to do something, let us treat them as criminals and not to look at it from the ethnic perspective to say, oh, these people have come.
Oh, yeah.
These, I can tell you, were things that started as small criminal enterprise that metamorphosed into something else. The solution lies with the people, but we must help the people to find this solution. Everything is not about boots, guns, and then ammunition and the military on the ground. There is no amount of soldiers that will be deployed to Bokos, to Mango, that can bring about peace, because the place is an agricultural and a very rural area.
Yeah.
There are no definite routes that can be manned. People can come in from different angles. There are isolated hamlets, farmsteads, and communities that are far from other ones that things can happen there, and it will take a long time before even the bigger settlements will get to know that something has happened to a small hamlet or a small settlement.
Dr. Adetayo, just so we don't miss this particular conversation, speaking of distrust that the people have, Dr. Mole had talked about earlier, human intelligence sources, and how we don't have that in this country in many ways. Interestingly, yesterday was, our police day, the first in Nigeria's history. And of course, the conversation around the protests came up. We had a very terrible situation here in Channels Television where our reporter in Rivers State, Charles Oporum, was manhandled, beaten up by a police officer. And of course, we've been calling all day. We've been asking that the Nigerian police force identify this police officer who manhandled Charles Oporum and bring him to justice. We need to see that justice is done in this particular situation. But let's talk a little bit about that trust deficit in the light of the protests that we saw yesterday. One of the ideas that we gave here on the program was, instead of telling protesters not to come out because they're going to be dignitaries, it will be an opportunity for you to market how democratic you are as a police force, to be protecting the protesters, doing your job while you're celebrating your day. It's an opportunity, and I think in many ways that was lost in many parts of the country. But I want you to speak to that trust deficit and how the police force can engender trust in the Nigerian people again.
Well, I think I must say that policing can be said to be better now than it used to be. And it is not entirely possible that we'll find a situation where one way or the other during incident like that we may not have, unfortunate incident like the one that you just mentioned, journalists, and that also speaks to the hazard of the job, where in the course of the commotion, journalists could fall a victim. And I believe that China TV's leadership has a way in which they engage the law enforcement agencies to ensure that if the police officers involved have done something wrong, they will definitely get the response that they deserve, and the kind of justice that can bring about closure to your organization. But that, I would say that I also need to also say that protests is an issue of rights, and also we must also recognize the fact that people not protesting is also they have right not to protest. And when one is trying to protest, protest should not hinder the rights of those who do not want to protest. And likely we just have to look at how those that are to ensure that those who are protesting do not in any way, cross and impede the activities of those who are not protesting. We can do better, and we should just expect that we'll continue to do better. Even in the United States of America, the so-called version of democracy and civilization, we still have cases where, in the course of them trying to, maintain law and order, protesters, tear gas were being shot at protesters, and even journalists also were hit or arrested in the process, but later they were cleared. It is part, of those things that happen when there is protest and they are trying to actually manage or control protesters. Now, there's always a thin line between, a protest being peaceful and the protest later not becoming peaceful.
Dr. Adeta, I'm going to have to stop you there, because I've heard your thoughts on that. Just so I can get Dr. Mole's thoughts on that. He's saying this is just part of it. When a journalist is doing his job and the police attacks him, that's not part of the job, is it?
No, it's not part of the job, but I think what he was saying, which is true in any country, that there's no way one IGP, doesn't matter how many instructions he gives out, can control the behavior of 300,000 plus officers. Mm-hmm. There will always be elements that will not, in fact, that's why some of them are disciplined, because they know that what they've done is against protocol. So one can make excuses for that. But I think, in the terms of the discussion you were talking about all this community, one thing that I think is essential, I need to say this, very critical. About 2.5 years ago, the then IG, Al-Khali Baba, gave a speech in which he identified that there are over 80 armed non-state actor groups in Nigeria. Now, the challenge is, for any crime to take place, we say you need motive, means, and opportunity. Mm-hmm. So which means that there are lots of guns for hire all over the country, in every community.
What we can hope is that those guns will not be deployed, or will not be turned on citizens and on journalists who are just trying to do their job. We're totally out of time, gentlemen. We have to thank you both for coming on the program this morning. We're hoping that this will be an ongoing conversation. Dr. Charles Omole is the Director General, Institute for Police and Security Policy Research, and we've also been speaking with Dr. Seyi Adetayo, who's the CEO of Eon's Intelligence. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning.